well as a balik scientist appointment with you at in Tacloban. That's what we are working on. So unfortunately, Joel is not able to come to the Philippines yet, but we are already on track in our plans. So
it will happen.
yeah, I know
It will happen, yes.
it will definitely. So it doesn't prevent us from planning things and working it. So we have a great plan there, Yusek. We'll keep you posted. So
Thank you. We actually even thought about doing a hybrid balik scientists where you stay where you are, but it doesn't work.
yeah.
Yeah, it's just you really have to come here.
Anyway,
Yeah.
morning. Hi, Anne. Morning.
Hello, Undersecretary Fita.
Good morning, Joel. Finally.
Good morning.
Yes.
I've been trying to get in the last minute, so many minutes.
Okay.
Did you get my email, Joel?
I did, and it's perfectly fine. So you will be the first panelist to talk.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Yeah.
Morning, Yusek Fita.
Hi, Yusek Geb. Tayo ulit.
Yeah, so
Yusek Boy in the other meeting.
Yeah, I just want to introduce everyone. So there's Attorney Alan Gepti, Kevin Coim, Ann Villalobos, Assistant Secretary Asteria from DTI. And of course, Yusek Gev and Undersecretary Aldaba. And Alvin Kulawi is with us as well.
GovNap didn't confirm, Joel.
I'm sorry?
I saw NAP's picture.
Yes. Yeah, he confirmed.
Okay.
He did.
Okay.
Yeah. He'll be with us.
Okay. He's just not he's not here yet.
He's not logged in yet, so I'm sure in the next 2 minutes he will be.
Okay.
Sir Joel, I'll be playing the PAASE video at 8 o'clock in a minute. Or
let's wait a little bit. Yeah. We probably will be delayed by about 5 minutes.
All right.
Are you recording now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So just to let everyone know, this proceeding is being recorded. So folks are starting to trickle in.
How many participants are you expecting, Joel, to join?
I don't really know because we have 3 sessions that are parallel going on. Okay. I'd guess about up to 50, I would think. But this is video recorded anyway. And so more people will be able to see this video later on.
You mentioned that it's going to be published on YouTube.
Yes, it will be. And actually, it's going to be streamed on YouTube currently, correct, Mon?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Mon, I suggest you could start playing the video, the introductory video at 5:05. I mean 8:05 your time.
Okay, sir.
So let's see.
Hello, Attorney Alan. I was listening po kanina and I could hear some feedback when you talk. Can we test your mic again po, just to be sure?
Okay, mic test.
Ayan, okay, perfect. Thank you.
It's okay now?
It's okay now.
Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
Okay, so wait.
To answer Attorney Allen's question a while ago, we're expecting about 70 participants.
Oh, there we go.
Hopefully they all wake up.
Oh, because they registered. You're right.
And it has been raining all night, at least here in this part of the Philippines. So it's quite hard to wake up today.
So anyway, our other panelist, Napoleon Concepcion, he just asked for the link and I sent it to him. So he should be logging in momentarily. So I think all the speakers are in. Mon, I think you can go ahead and play the introductory video now.
All right, sir.
So all the sessions play this standard video.
Science and technology and innovation, these are indispensable in the modern economy, in the modern world.
The meeting at the MSI, and we resolved among about 6 to 8 of us, local members, first to form PAASE Philippines so that we could continue to host meetings here, but also to go on a massive campaign to try to get support from the national government through the legislative and executive branches to invest more in science and technology. So it started with a white paper, a position paper that we co-authored among 6 of us, namely Ernie Pernia, Cesar Saloma, Rador Asansa, Toby Diarita Fataneo, and Aldin Colaba de la Sala, and myself.
So PAASE historically, in the past 10, 20 years for sure, have been collaborating with our counterparts here in the Philippines at various universities. And a lot of these interactions probably started as peer-to-peer. But thankfully, we have the Department of Science and Technology here in the Philippines, and they've come up with some really helpful and very impactful programs that actually enable PAASE members that are based in the United States and other parts of the world to actually come here and do extensive research and academic partnerships and collaborations.
Well, I think that one of the good things that PAASE is doing is really trying to stay in touch with the researchers and the scientists here in the Philippines. So I think that is one of the good programs that they keep on supporting some of the initiatives of our researchers and scientists here in the country, trying to align also their assistance towards the plans of the Philippine government.
It's very important that the PAASE members and scientists based in the Philippines are continuously in contact, so we will know the needs of the Filipinos and opportunities that Filipinos can have to do science with their PAASE counterparts. So these interactions, such as the conference that we're holding and the annual conferences that we have,
the Philippines and the scientists there have very unique perspective that adds to discoveries and inventions advancing in general the field.
These members, because they are part of an academy, it implies that they are productive. So they have publications, they have innovations, they have inventions, patents, and they have, they have an impact on society. Okay, so these are the people who can convince government, invest more in science and technology, and that was really the gist of our paper, our position paper in 2000. And it is Ernie Pernia who said that R&D by nature is expensive and it is a public good. So it is important for the government to take the lead in investing in R&D.
To increase the economic growth potential of the country, we cannot continue to just rely on traditional inputs into production as capital and labor. We also need to develop our expertise in science and technology and innovation so that we can come up with new systems, new ways of doing things.
I think that science, researchers, industry, and even the government is really like an ecosystem of knowledge. So I think it doesn't really matter if you're coming from a private institution or a public institution, such as a state university. I think we all have a role to play to improve the research capabilities and scientific knowledge here in the country. I think it is about time for us to realize that one of our roles as academics, as researchers, as scientists, is to actually contribute to that global body of knowledge.
And the role of this cooperation among these government agencies really is to be able to attract science and technology, global-based companies to set up shop here. And that is really key in terms of developing the science and technology innovation ecosystem in the country.
Particularly because there's that deep desire. And what PAASE does and can do more of is to promote this relationship between its members.
We really need to ratchet up the appreciation, the recognition of the importance of science and technology and innovation.
And we are all trying to attain what we call the common good, the greater, higher, long-term good of the Filipino people.
Sir Joel, I think you're on mute.
Ooh. All right, thank you. So good morning, everyone in the Philippines, and good evening here in North America. This is the panel discussion on regional outreach, development of science and technology innovation ecosystem. As we are speaking here, more folks will be coming in, and this program is being recorded, and so more will be able to view this program. But anyway, this morning, my co-moderator is Dr. Ann Villalobos, who just recently retired from Johnson & Johnson, but she remains a consultant for the company. And she's currently at Central Mindanao University in Bukidnon in Mindanao, Philippines, with her returning scientist or balik scientist engagement. So Ann, thank you for joining us today. And of course, we have a panel of distinguished panelists today. We have Mr. Napoleon Concepcion with the Board of Governors of the Philippine Board of Investments. We're also joined by Undersecretary Rafaelita Aldaba, the Undersecretary for Competitiveness and Innovation in the Department of Trade and Industry. We have Attorney Alan Gepti, Assistant Secretary for Industry Development and Trade Policy, also with the Department of Trade and Industry. We have Dr. Rowena Guevara, the Undersecretary for Research and Development in the Department of Science and Technology. We have Assistant Secretary Asteria Caberte from the Regional Operations Group of the Department of Trade and Industry. And last but not least, we have Mr. Kevin Coim, who is the founder and CEO of Tech Ranch, which is based in Austin, Texas. So the way we're going to do our proceedings is that we're going to have 10-minute presentations, which are introductory presentations from each of our distinguished panelists. So that will take about an hour. And then after that, Ann and I will lead a moderated discussion. And that will take about 60 minutes or so. And we encourage members of the audience to please post your questions on the chat, and we will be able to address those questions for about 20 minutes after the moderated discussion. So without further ado, we're going to start with the introductory presentations from our panelists. Just a quick reminder, if you could please turn off your microphone when you are not speaking so that we can have some smooth proceedings. So our first panelist to give an introductory talk is Undersecretary Aldaba from the Department of Trade and Industry on Competitiveness and Innovation. Secretary Aldaba, yes, thank you.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much, Joel and to PAASE for this opportunity. Well, in this very short introductory presentation, I would like to share how government, academia, and industry are working together in building an inclusive innovation and entrepreneurship ecosystem. For instance, DTI and DOST, along with other government agencies, of course, are collaborating to link research ideas and prototypes to the private sector, as well as to create regional inclusive innovation centers and promote startup growth and development. Well, innovation is at the heart of the Philippine New Industrial Strategy, which is known as Inclusive Innovation Industrial Strategy, or IQS, which aims to grow globally competitive and innovative industries. The underlying framework, as you can see, is given by the relationship between competition, innovation, and productivity, which provides the channels through which investments, employment, and growth would be generated. And there are 6 major strategic actions under this IQS. Number 1, of course, is the building of an inclusive innovation and entrepreneurship ecosystem with focus on promoting research commercialization and creation of new products, services, processes, and new business models. The others would include embracing Industry 4.0 technologies to strengthen competitiveness and sustainability of industries, the development of MSMEs and startups, the integration of our production systems, and the upskilling and reskilling our workforce, upgrading our education curricula, strengthening STEM-related skills and soft skills, improving our ease of doing business, and addressing both hard and soft infrastructure. Now, in terms of priority industries, we are focusing on manufacturing, agribusiness, services, and public utilities, along with new technologies and innovation activities like the creation of smart cities, mobility solutions, online health and education, digital economy, climate change, and green products. Now, in terms of the country's state of innovation, the Global Innovation Index showed a significant jump in our ranking from 73 in 2018 to 54 in 2019. The Inclusive Innovation and Entrepreneurship Roadmap aims to bridge the gaps between that would link together innovation and entrepreneurship ecosystems. And note that based on the innovation assessment by the USAID STRIDE team, improvements were seen in all the innovation ecosystem elements, consisting of human capital and education, research and knowledge creation, knowledge transfer, startups, and spin-offs, along with collaboration. Although, of course, there are still some remaining challenges, particularly in procurement regulations, R&D investments, financing startups, and spin-offs. The roadmap emphasized the following: the need for us to strengthen government academe industry collaboration, building human capital, creation of an enabling environment to accelerate innovation, building an entrepreneurial culture and support for micro, small, and medium enterprises, startups, and spin-offs, developing industry clusters, and building funding and financing structure. Now, what we envision is a science and technology-driven industrialization through innovation and research commercialization. And together with the OST and the ICT, NEDA, and the other government agencies, we are building what we call regional inclusive innovation centers that would serve as the cornerstone of IQS and link government, academe, industry, innovation activities and programs. These RIICs are platforms connecting the different players in the innovation and entrepreneurship ecosystem. We are piloting this in 4 regions, in Davao, Cebu, Cagayan de Oro, and Legazpi. And with the support of the USAID STRIDE team, we are conducting series of ideation, design workshops, and R&D engagements in collaboration with the government agencies that I mentioned. And 3 regional development councils from Davao, CDO, and Bicol already passed resolutions adopting the RIIC initiatives as part of the regional agendas for innovation and development. And note also that these RIIC initiatives are being spearheaded by local industry associations. The RICS has been providing support in linking industry and academe in pursuing R&D and commercialization. And you can see on the slide some of the projects, R&D, along with other activities that have been initiated both by the academe and industry. Maybe later we can talk more about this. And I would also want to share the establishment of a knowledge, innovation, and science and technology park in the Batangas State University. This has been proclaimed as a special economic zone, and locators in the park would be entitled to incentives. The plan is to build infrastructures such as technology hub, design and innovation building, technology centrum, and a data center. Our startup ecosystem is currently valued at 1.6 billion. It is young and full of potential and embedded capabilities. The Global Startup Ecosystem Report or Genome indicated that Manila ranks 36th globally among the world's top 100 emerging ecosystems. It is also among the top 20 ecosystems for bang for buck and among the top 30 ecosystems for affordable talent, and expected to grow at rates ranging from 24 to 26% would be the fintech and e-commerce sectors. So, well, as you can see, innovation is really at the front and center of Philippine industrial policies, and RIICs are meant to address the weak linkages between stakeholders and to serve as linchpin of productive collaborations between and among government, academe, and industry. And with strong collaboration between government, academe, and industry, we will be able to enable industries to address challenges and take advantage of the opportunities from Industry 4.0 and serve as engine for sustainable growth, job creation, and poverty reduction. Thank you. Back to you, Joel.
Thank you very much, Undersecretary Aldaba. I know that you will have to go to another meeting, but you're coming back, right? So we will be able to pose questions to you later during the moderated discussion. So thank you very much indeed. Our next panelist to give us an introductory talk is Mr. Napoleon Concepcion, and he is with the Board of Governors of the Philippine Board of Investments. Nap and I met actually at the University of the Philippines, Mindanao last year. I think it was summertime when I was invited there to give a presentation. So it was a pleasure meeting Nap in Mindanao. So thank you for joining us this morning. And I think you're in the process of sharing your screen, correct?
I hope I did it right. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure and an honor to be invited to this gathering, and congratulations on your 40th anniversary. And I'd like to jump into the presentation. First of all, a brief introduction to the Board of Investment. The Board of Investment was created through an Executive Order 226, otherwise known as the Omnibus Investment Code, and is an attached agency of the Department of Trade and Industry. We are the leading government agency responsible for the promotion of investments in the Philippines. We assist basically Filipino and foreign investors to venture and prosper in desirable areas of economic activities. So the BOI is your one-stop shop in doing business in the Philippines. We do advisories, we give counseling, we make sure that your investment is realized, and then afterwards, if you run into any problems, we do have an aftercare service. We are a knowledge-based research and information institution. We basically, we fund roadmaps for individual industries, and we are the repository of all those roadmaps. So if anybody's interested, just write to the Board of Investment. We do marketing and promotions. We do it internationally by conducting roadshows abroad and requesting our DTI trade consuls to organize the local businessmen in their localities. And we also do domestic roadshows to encourage or promote our businesses. Then, of course, we're better known. We're known for the incentives that we provide, both fiscal and non-fiscal. And then, of course, as our fiscal support, we give income tax holidays depending on the type of industry that you're engaged in and the locality. Then, of course, we are engaged in policy in relation, especially now that the tax reform program is being discussed in the Senate. We do contribute to policy in government. And now what I did was to go directly into the questions. The first one is to explore how best to transform the Philippine position of the Philippines as an S&T global. I'm sorry, I think. Anyway, we need to rethink globalization resulting from the pandemic. Most companies, multinationals, big companies abroad, are rethinking their globalization strategies. So we need to adapt to whatever decisions they have to make. At the same time, for us, we need to also rethink how those decisions affect our industries. We understand that we have wicked problems. We need to understand that we have wicked problems and wicked systems created by this pandemic. We have a volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous world now, and it makes it difficult to develop new products in the midst of uncertainty. We need to prioritize resources of government to the needs of Filipinos. Investment would be nice, but government has to prioritize resources. Most of us in government have already cut our budgets. We have given back so that the government can attend to the needs as far as the food supply, the nutrition of our citizenry. We have a very big part of our budget dedicated for social amelioration programs and all other assistance programs that have been put in place to address the pandemic. We need to contribute to the development of shorter supply chains by industry clusters, and we can probably discuss that later. To explore, the second question was to explore how best to geographically distribute the various operations of S&T Manufacturing Innovation Global Hub across the country. Well, first, we need to provide the infrastructure. One of the most common complaints of investors coming into the country is we don't have enough power, so we need to promote renewable energy and energy efficiency programs, which we have actually just done with the energy efficiency law just being passed last year. We need to improve digital connectivity, especially now in COVID, where people are restricted from traveling. I'd just like to show a supply chain model, which could be replicated for all the other industries, but this one is for farming. The farmers have wholesalers, traders, vegetable processors, then they have wet markets, and supermarkets that are supplied from the second level, and then finally it goes to the consumer or to the household. However, due to the COVID, the wholesalers were not connected, the traders and consolidators, the vegetable processors. But wet markets, some of them were open, supermarkets were okay, fast food chains closed, hotels, restaurants. And now the only way to for the vegetable farmer to sell to the households is to go directly. And what you need there is a direct retailing, and it's basically digital. And then we have also the relief goods, where there's a disruption in the supply chain because the LGUs are buying directly from the farmers and providing directly to the households. So this is the new model, and this in effect is actually, this situation can be replicated. And this direct retailing could be prevented if we can link everyone digitally. So digital connectivity will provide the basis for e-commerce. We need to strengthen the services of NGAs in the region. Right now, if you need any documents, you'll have to go to connect to the server located in Manila, or physically fly into Manila to get whatever clearances or documents you need. So we need to strengthen the services by making that kind of service available in the regions. So we need to build a quality and unified data repository as a trusted national resource to create evidence-based policy solutions and decisions. Most data of government are siloed in individual repositories, and there's no crisscrossing, so data is not shared. And it's very difficult to manage especially now that we need an agile or a quicker response to the pandemic as it progresses in its course. So we need a digital solution to capture real-time data and build agile industries. As you may know, data before pre-COVID may not be applicable now. There has been hoarding, uh, borders have been closed, free trade agreements cannot be relied on, so importation is affected, therefore our production is affected. So we need to capture real-time data. And unless you have this repository where you can blend and mix existing data with real-time data, then it's very difficult for government to address especially the impact of this pandemic. And lastly, it's the last question posed was, oops, I have to go back, sorry, is to explore how best to build a globally linked S&T enterprise and entrepreneurship network in the Philippines. So we need to promote a culture of innovation. We need to upgrade intellectual property rights protection as for our creative people, the scientists, they are securing the software developers, scientists, engineers, they're securing patent protection from other countries like Japan and the US. And therefore, the value from their creation is not shared in the country. So businesses take advantage of the results of their researches and build these products or manufacture these products abroad. There's no much reward for the creator. Most of the disciplinary experts that we need to promote innovation, to create ideas are in the university. But however, if they're in the state universities, their practice is limited, and they do not fully benefit from the discovery, from the researches that they have added to the knowledge, culture, to the body of knowledge. I can give examples later on. We need to promote the culture of bayanihan. Government must take the role of facilitator, regulator, and then participant. Of course, we have the small business group, a small business group of DTI providing access to finance for micro and small enterprises. But we have to go beyond that. We need to be able to link everyone, be a part of the discussion. For example, right now we're in discussion with an airline who wants to promote cargo operation in the light of the decrease in tourist travel. So we're linking them with the Department of Agriculture, the Department of Trade, and we have to provide that space for a healthy discussion, for collaboration. So it is at this time that the government has to take an active part in the development of the country. We need to promote inclusive and sustainable industrialization. Port, I forgot to delete the word port. We need to encourage or support the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals by creating a social enterprise, more impact enterprise. So this includes social enterprises where revenues for social and environmental impact are created. We need to build inclusive businesses, which we are engaged in with the Board of Investments, where the micro and small enterprises are linked to the operation of the value chain of medium and large enterprises as suppliers, distributors, retailers, or customers. And then we need more impact investments. These are activities with the intention of having social and environmental impact in addition to generating financial return. So government has really taken some of the risk that our investors, our inventors are facing. And hopefully the Board of Investment will live up to the challenge. So With that, I thank this group for this opportunity to share my thoughts. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you very much, Mr. Concepcion, for your recommendations. We definitely will get back to them during the moderated discussion. So our next panelist to give the introductory presentation is Attorney Alan Gepti. He is Assistant Secretary for Industrial Development and Trade Policy in the Department of Trade and Industry. Attorney Alan.
Okay, thank you, Joel, for the introduction. Good morning, everyone. First, I would like to thank the Philippine American Academy of Science and Engineering for giving me the opportunity to be part of this important online congress and share my insights on the development of a science and technology innovation ecosystem in the Philippines. Specifically to discuss how to transform and position the Philippines as a science and technology manufacturing and innovation global hub, and how best to build a globally linked science and technology entrepreneurship network in the Philippines. Indeed, there is no mathematical formula for such kind of a challenge. For force, there are many strategies and approaches that can be resorted to address it. For sure, other panelists will have their own views and recommendations on the matter. But to give context on my perspective, I want to stress that my professional background is in the field of law, particularly intellectual property law, corporate law, and international trade law. I once served as the Deputy Director General of the Intellectual Property Office of the Philippines. Thus, my mental model would be partial in favor of intellectual property protection and enforcement. And now that I am in charge of international trade, my views would be influenced by certain concepts such as stability and predictability of rules, market access, and economic integration. Making the Philippines as the science and technology, manufacturing, and innovation global hub, for me, is a question of institutional configuration, competence, and competitiveness. Institutional configuration because it is the environment that basically stimulates innovation. In other words, what elements of the environment should be present in order to foster creative thinking and innovation on new products, processes, and even business models. For others, they may submit that the conditions could be a question of location or geographic place, such as Asia vis-a-vis Europe, North vis-a-vis South, among others. In his book, The Geography of Genius, Eric Weiner studied the flow of expertise and knowledge in the course of time. In Athens, for example, it was noted that Athenians were open to outside ideas, and they enhanced what they learned from others. This is one trait that is very important for creative people. In China, the Chinese invented a lot of things and created incredible works of art. In the case of Florence, Italy, the patrons at that time invested in the arts, and there was a flood of money that paved the way for monuments and architectural projects, which attracted the best of the minds of the era. They backed artists like Michelangelo and Leonardo da Vinci, and many, many others. Were it not for the patrons at that time, we probably would not have all the great art that we admire today. In other words, one element is patronage, support, or investment. Weiner stressed that places that produce geniuses tend to have more open policies towards immigrants. It was true in ancient Athens, and it is true in Silicon Valley today. He concludes that it's not precisely the geography, but rather a specific set of conditions that create genius clusters, or more accurately, attract geniuses to a certain place. Today, the challenge then is defining the conditions the country needs for it to be an innovation hub, taking into account current circumstances. For one, we are in the era of the fourth industrial revolution. According to Professor Klaus Schwab, he stressed that it is characterized by a range of new technologies that are fusing the physical, digital, and biological worlds, impacting all disciplines, economies, and industries, and even challenging ideas about what it means to be human. The resulting shifts and disruptions mean that we live in a time of great promise and great peril. The world has the potential to connect billions more people to digital networks, dramatically improve the efficiency of organizations, and even manage assets in ways that can help regenerate the natural environment, potentially undoing the damage of previous industrial revolutions. The message is just simple. This is the era not just of innovation, but extreme innovation, where innovation process in itself is being challenged and redefined. It is in this context, then, that there has to be a variety of ideas, exchange of views, collaboration, and a lot of deconstruction or analysis. Notably, the challenges that we have and the fast-paced technology is always ahead of the development of laws, rules, and regulations. And the reality is that society has still to live in a rules-based system and roll out an efficient implementation thereof. Thus, laws as a framework for an innovation ecosystem would be relevant. On this note, institutional configuration should cover, among others, the legal regime and institutional programs and initiatives of the country. The question is, do we have enough laws to support an innovation ecosystem in the country? I submit that the Philippines, compared to other countries in the region, has a stable legal regime to promote and protect innovation. First, we have a strong IP system, which is necessary to encourage innovation and secure protection of intellectual property rights. The IP system is one important tool and equalizer available to all countries and individuals. It can really spell the difference between success and failure. Thus, other than IP creation, one must be able to take advantage of the IP system from strategic IP commercialization, IP valuation, and even IP enforcement. While challenges remain, it may be well to stress that the Philippines is very strong in patent protection in particular. Based on the 2019 International Property Rights Index, the Philippines is ranked number 7 in Asia and Oceania region and number 39 globally. This speaks a lot about our patent laws, competence of our patent examiners, and quality of our patent examination. This advantage in patent protection has been reinforced by the designation of the Intellectual Property Office of the Philippines as an international searching authority and international preliminary examining authority in October 2017. As the second international searching authority in Southeast Asia, the Philippines is expected to spur innovation and technological advancement that are key factors in deepening ASEAN economic integration. As a complementary measure, the Philippines has 100 innovation and technology support offices all over the country, mostly stationed in various universities, state colleges, and research and development institutions. If I'm not mistaken, in terms of number, we are one of the countries with the greatest number of technology and innovation centers. The ITSOs are being envisioned to contribute to the country's economic and technological development by enabling them to deliver better quality research outputs through patent search, to strategically protect intellectual property, and to utilize and commercialize their intellectual properties. Note that most of the world's famous inventions were developed and are invented in universities, such as insulin, fluoride, toothpaste, seatbelt, and the antibiotic drug streptomycin for tuberculosis. Thus, through this network, we have to generate more inventions and innovation. In the 2019 Global Innovation Index, the Philippines was ranked 54th from 73rd in 2018. The said improvement placed the country to be part of the 42% leading innovative economies, and with 100 ITSOs as innovation hubs, definitely the same may have impacted in the country's ranking in innovation. To complement our strong IP system, the Philippines has a Technology Transfer Act, which paves the way for our researchers, scientists, and research and development institutions to own, manage, and commercialize intellectual property. It also encourages public-private collaboration, both in research and IP commercialization. The passage of the Philippine Innovative Startup Act in 2018 will also provide benefits and incentives to startups and startup enablers in the country. On the same vein, the recent passage of the Philippine Innovation Act will not only promote creative thinking and competitiveness, but will ensure effective coordination of innovation policies and programs. It will also strengthen the position of MSMEs in the innovation ecosystem and strengthen partnerships between the public and private sectors, academe, and research and development institutions. This is not to mention that funds are earmarked and that innovation development credit is institutionalized. The various programs and capacity building also being undertaken by the Department of Science and Technology provides a synergy of initiatives that establish and support an environment conducive to innovation and research and development. At the international trade perspective, one of the offensive interests that the Philippines is strongly pushing is to open market access on sectors and subsectors that would further enhance the country's investment opportunities as well as capabilities in research and development. We need to broaden the field of opportunities for our professionals, researchers, scientists, and skilled workers, while working a close collaboration with other advanced countries. After all, being open to other ideas and perspectives is an element of an innovation ecosystem. Thus, we are working for the conclusion of some free trade agreements, including the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement, which is viewed as a catalyst in stimulating growth and development. Given this kind of environment and development in the country and clear and cohesive innovation policies, it can be said then that the Philippines has a strong foundation to support and stimulate innovation. The next question then is competence. Do we have the skills and capabilities to research, develop, and innovate new solutions and technologies? Do we have access to a vast array of information and knowledge necessary to equip our people in the area of innovation? In this era of knowledge-based economy, where innovation and creativity play a vital role, one asset or advantage that is indispensable and material is people. One concern attributed to the Philippines when it comes to innovation is its very minimal number of patent filings. This is because the number of patent filings is sometimes linked to one's research capability. While this may be true, it should not be amiss to point that in many foreign patent filings, there are several instances where a Filipino would be part of the research team of some big companies, or may have some footprint in the invention process. In other words, the presence of Filipinos in the field of research and development cannot be discarded. In 2014, I also chanced an article in Bloomberg Businessweek magazine entitled "Silicon Valley Imports Its Brains. Where do they come from?" Reading the same, it is interesting to note that the Philippines was ranked number 6. The number 1 spot belongs to Mexico, followed by Texas, Arizona, Washington, and Illinois as number 5. But Texas, Arizona, Washington, and Illinois are all in the United States. Thus, if it will be on a country-to-country basis, the Philippines is actually ranked number 3. This reflects the level of intelligence and creativity of Filipinos. And given the growing innovation ecosystem in the country, a Silicon Valley in the Philippines may not be far-fetched. In addition, the Philippines is in a demographic sweet spot, as majority of its population are working age between 15 and 64 years old, outnumbering its dependents. One important advantage of the country relative to the rest of the world is that the median age is about 24 years old versus most other economies. This is not to mention that facility with the English language, which is another competitive advantage of the Filipinos, which is vital in education and capacity building. With an entrenched institutional and legal foundation and the competence of Filipinos, there is no reason why the Philippines cannot be competitive. Yes, the Philippines can be competitive in the area of innovation. Perhaps one may argue that the Philippines is not that strong in research and development, as well as infrastructure support on science and technology compared to other countries. It is true to some extent, but what is important to note is that steadily the country's innovation index has been improving. In fact, last year, as mentioned earlier, the Philippines jumped 19 notches to rank 54th in the latest Global Innovation Index, marking the biggest leap among Southeast Asian countries. Note that according to the report, the Philippines has improved in almost all pillars of the Global Innovation Index, including business sophistication, knowledge and technology outputs, and creative outputs. The posted improvements of the Philippines reflect the efforts of the departments and agencies who have pushed science and technology and innovation as key priorities for the government agenda. On the economic front, one solution to spur economic development and to better the lives of each and every Filipino is the use of innovation and technology transfer. This approach has been proven effective for some of our more economically advanced neighbors. Take the case of South Korea. It is one of the few countries in the world that has successfully transformed itself from a least developed country into a first world country. The key driver of its economic expansion is exports on the heels of technological investment. In the 60s and 70s, its annual R&D expenditures were less than 1% of GDP. But through the years, South Korea managed to grow its R&D investments and in the process, move up from being a low-end assembly of hub imported materials and parts to a country of innovators and creators. The Philippines' R&D expenditures remain very low. Thus, there is a need for us to move up the technology value chain and expand the market of our products. Our technology exports should cater not only to the domestic market, but to the international market as well and beyond the traditional market. It is clear then that we must increase investment of both government and enterprise to support the development of innovation, science, and technology. This ensures funding for new projects and commercialization of ideas as an outcome. In relation to this, investment in education is also crucial to hone talent in science and technology and encourage innovation. By providing opportunities for study and research, we can advance innovation and produce better results. In the aspect of trade at present, one of the highest challenges of the country is its growing deficit. But historically, the archipelago was basically a marketplace where porcelains, garments, jewelry, among others, were being traded in the past. If you will listen to the historian Nick Joaquin, the archipelago was ignored by its neighbors in the past. If it were not for Western interests, invasion, and intervention, the Philippine archipelago would have ended up like the underdeveloped Pacific Islands in Oceania. Thus, 1521 and 1565 is not really the time of the coming of the West to our land, but the time of the coming into our culture of certain tools and technologies. The arrival of Western tools and technologies brought by the Spaniards basically led to a lot of transformation and development in the country. In the process, the opening of Manila-Acapulco galleon trade paved the way for international trade. Thus, had it not for the said advent of globalization, the Philippines may not have leveled up in terms of socio-economic development. It may have remained as the old marketplace where certain manufactured goods are traded in exchange of gold, copper, and other natural resources. In other words, the opening of the Philippines to the international community made Filipinos become more creative and innovative. In the process, we were able to create our unique culture, art, food, and technologies. The Philippine economy, therefore, was and has always been built through trade and economic integration, strong consumer demand, vibrant labor market, and the Filipinos' resilience, creativity, and innovation. In this era of globalization and the fast evolution of technology, and given the challenges we are facing right now, brought about by the current pandemic, the need to reflect and recalibrate policies towards a more innovative Philippines becomes more imperative. This time of pandemic is a time of intense innovation activity. Many products, processes, and business models are being studied, reviewed, and evaluated right now. Technology anchored on the internet or cloud computing are on the rise. It is said that the lockdown has brought forward a shift to online work practices and team sharing platforms while creating new opportunities. One example cited is the case of 3D printing getting a boost by helping to replace faraway suppliers with nearby 3D printing contractors and make supply chains more resilient. Some resorted to online platform in the distribution of goods that can be converted digitally, such as in the case of software, movies, games, among others. In some, economic activities can be more complex and integrated from an already complicated and interdependent global economy. Some may say that it may be difficult for us to compete on the production aspect of certain goods and products. But if the Philippines want to carve a niche in the whole spectrum of the global value chain, it may be well to optimize its competitive advantage in the area of design, research, product development, and innovation. For sure, the Philippines can be a key player in licensing and exports of technologies worldwide, and eventually be a global hub for science and technology, manufacturing, and innovation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Attorney Gapti. You surely presented quite a number of ideas in there that we'll be going back to during the moderated session. Dr. Guevara, you're still around. Would you like to do the presentation now or later?
Do it later, please.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, I just wanted to check with you. Yes, no problem. So our next panelist to give us an introductory talk is Assistant Secretary Asteria Caberte. She's with the Regional Operations Group in the Department of Trade and Industry. Assistant Secretary Asteria, please.
Thank you. Let me fix my screen sharing first. Okay. Good morning, everyone. My colleagues from DTI have aptly described or discussed the initiatives of the department in developing the framework and at the national level. But in the connection of innovation ecosystem and the entrepreneurship ecosystem. But I'd like to dwell more on how we are spreading this to the 16 regions in the country. That is via the Regional Operations Group of the Department of Trade and Industry. But before that, I would like to discuss a bit on the landscape of Philippine MSMEs. But I think this is quite similar to the rest, especially in the ASEAN. We define MSMEs as business establishments with 100 million assets and below, and with an employment of 200 employees and below. That is our definition. And we all know also, very similar with other countries, that it is giving 63% in terms of employment, and the total value adding is 35.7%, although it is really our aspiration to reach 40%. And of course, this is composed, 60% of this sector are exporters. Now, so this is actually I prepared slides, about 3 slides, but I will skip them because this will be a replication of what Yusek Fita Aldaba has discussed earlier. So I will dwell now on the regional outreach of these innovation initiatives to the 16 regions. At the Regional Operations Group, we implement various programs to strengthen outreach of our initiatives. These are implemented on a massive scale, broad-based and community-based approaches in order to provide government support to the grassroots, to the 16 regions in the country, and top key industry players on the ground. We have 2 major programs that support the RIICs, or the innovation of MSMEs. These 2 are the shared service facilities that are spread throughout the 16 regions. And we also have the industry clustering program. By the way, we have top 12 priority sectors in our inclusive innovation and strategy. We have aerospace parts, electrical and electronics, auto and auto parts, chemicals, shipbuilding, tourism, transport and logistics, construction, IT, BPM and e-commerce, agribusiness, tool and die, and iron and steel, and furniture, garments, and creatives. So I'll dwell now on our shared service facilities, which are spread throughout the 16 regions. This project provides machinery, equipment, tools, systems, accessories on a shared scheme among groups, cooperatives, or associations, and we even partner with local government units to improve competitiveness among our micro, small, and medium enterprises. It is a public-private partnership initiative implemented through cooperators with in-house and machinery and equipment, which are accessible to MSMEs. We also have the strengthening of our youth startups in creative industries in the Philippines. We had a study tour, which we did in Singapore and Indonesia, with the support of the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs, or UNDESA, to advance the DTI's commitment in accelerating efforts to enable the youth startups in the creative industries specifically. And these were participated in by 15 delegates from the country, and these were coming from the Regional Inclusive Innovation Centers, pilot areas, from Region 5, Region 7, Region 10, Region 11, and Region 4A. We also have, on the Fab Labs that we have, well, we all know it's a do-it-yourself open access market maker space. And we have in strong coordination with the Department of Science and Technology. We have 23 academe-based, and we have partnered 2 NGOs in setting up of our Fab Labs, and we also have 2 which we have partnered with local government units. I'm sorry, okay. So you can see in the map how we have spread out our Fab Labs in the country, in the archipelago. You will notice where I come from, just to highlight, I come from Region 7, and we have the most number of Fab Labs in the country. We have, these are some of the Fab Labs that we have in the country. We have Fab Lab Bicol. We have Cebu. We are partnering with the University of the Philippines. And we have the MSU IIT Fab Lab, also academe-based. Yeah, those are some of the samples of Fab Labs that we have in the country. And I'd like to discuss also on the industry clustering initiatives that we have. We have the following industry clusters, which are priority of the Regional Operations Group. We have cacao, we have coffee, we have wearables and home style, palm oil, and what else? Palm oil, cocoa coir. Yeah. So these are the industry clusters that we have. And we strengthen the partnership of academe, of other government agencies, and other private sector players in the industry cluster. And here is the enumeration: cocoa coir, rubber, and coffee, cacao, processed fruits and nuts, wearables and home style, bamboo, and palm oil. And in this priority industry clusters of the Regional Operations Group, we have cluster champions which really man or steer the initiative in the sectors. And we have the Regional Inclusive Innovation Centers. We link various DTI and DTI offices and projects such as SSFs, Fab Lab, Research and Development Centers, Food Innovation Centers. We also have negosyo centers in almost all local government units or towns in the country, which are really a connect, or that we maintain our presence in each town in the country. And we hope to cover all towns by 2021. We have support mechanisms in our RICs through incubators, accelerators, co-working spaces, and service providers will also be the key features of our RIICs. Venue for startups and micro, small, and medium enterprises to connect and network with industry experts to enhance their entrepreneurial know-how and enable them to be Industry 4.0 ready. So, as I have mentioned earlier, the RIICs, or Regional Inclusive Innovation Centers, pilot areas as of now, as we speak, is in Region 5, that is in Legazpi, Region 7, that is in Cebu, Region 10, that is in Cagayan de Oro, and in Region 11, we have in Davao, and a potential area is Region 4A. Now, coming up from Cebu City, we steered the ecosystem of the creative industry in the city. We gathered everyone. We had to quantify everyone, survey. We mapped. We had a creative mapping, and in later part of 2019, we were finally in Cebu City. I am still used to be Cebu, but Cebu City was designated by United Nations, or UNESCO, United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, as a UNESCO Creative City in 2019. So with these initiatives, this is a mix of young startups in the creative sector, where we really have this is a very good ecosystem to move forward science and technology also in the sector. And we have events boosting for innovation in Cebu City. We have an annual event for the young entrepreneurs. We have a roadshow every year. We also have Slingshot every year. This is a creative entrepreneurship summit in Cebu City. We do this. We are running our third, supposedly this year, our third, but definitely we will continue after COVID during our better normal in 2021. And we have we also have the Cebu Design Week. Actually, this is a platform where we gather all initiatives, all output, all work from the design sector of Cebu to sustain the momentum that they have to push for our common agenda. So that would be all our initiatives from the 16 regions, and I will be on standby to be part of the panel discussion later. Back to you, Sir Joel.
Thank you so much, Assistant Secretary Gaberte. So we're going to move on with the introductory presentation, and now we go to Mr. Kevin Coyne. Kevin is the founder and chief executive of Tech Ranch, which is based in Austin, Texas. Kevin and I actually met 2 years ago in Ramallah in the West Bank, Palestine, because we both were invited as presenters in a national innovation conference sponsored by the Palestine Higher Council for Innovation and Excellence. So Kevin, welcome to the Philippine American Academy of Science and Engineering.
Joel, thank you very much. It's my honor to be here. And good morning to everyone. Thank you to the Academy for letting me join you today. I'm honored to be a part of such a distinguished panel and excited to hear the things that you're setting out as policy for the country, because innovation and entrepreneurship has been my whole career and is where my passion is. And as Joel mentioned, I've traveled the world, especially 22 countries in the last 4 years alone, specifically focused on looking at how we can build bridges to drive innovation and entrepreneurship. I'm going to share just a little bit of the context of what's happened in Austin, Texas. Some people know a little bit about Austin and how Austin has all of a sudden become, as Forbes has said, the one of the top cities in the world for entrepreneurship. But then what's the underlying dynamic that actually supported that? And I offer these comments in support of what you're doing with the country, as well as to explore how we can build relationship together. First off, a little bit about Tech Ranch. Tech Ranch was the first privately funded incubator in the Austin area. I'm the founder of Tech Ranch. We also started Austin's first co-working space many years ago. Started in 2003, but probably the most important thing for for my personal heart is being recognized as the in the top 3 social impact incubators. So specifically, the thing that we're focused on is how can we use innovation and entrepreneurship to do what we call impact innovation, solving human needs. Impact innovation is how is it that we can support the early stage entrepreneurs, take the science and technology that's being developed in university and take it, from the lab bench into the solutions that are actually going to change the world for the better. The list right here kind of gives us a short list of some of the areas that Tech Ranch has entrepreneurs from around the world. But each one of these, what we're really targeting is how can we target a specific driving a human need so that we get to shared prosperity around the world. There's a one of my favorite science fiction authors is a gentleman by the name of William Gibson. And he has said, the future is already here, it's just not widely distributed yet. Well, the Kevin Coyne corollary to that is all the world's problems have already been solved. The thing that drives me is this vision that all the world's problems have already been solved. It's just a matter of us connecting the solution that some entrepreneur has in one part of the world to the problem area, or let's read it as the market in another part of the world. I can give you countless examples like this, everything from in neighboring Adelaide, Australia, how we were able to connect some of their innovative capability that came from Flinders University to a need area in Ethiopia, but not around charity, but instead around driving solutions for human need problems through business. And we can talk a little bit more about that, but I want to kind of give you a context of my come from on this. A little bit about Austin. Many people don't know that Austin has been recognized by Forbes magazine as the most entrepreneurial city. They said the most entrepreneurial city in the world. I don't want to be too proud of a Texan to say it's, we have an expression that says everything's bigger in Texas. But the thing that actually I really want to say is, as getting to work in Silicon Valley early in my career, I worked for Steve Jobs at a company called Next, and I had that experience. And it's interesting because I kept on coming back to Austin. And 2 of the other presenters actually mentioned some of the key parts about what are the cultural frames? How do we drive innovation? How do we actually engender this at the most basic levels of entrepreneurship? And I think Austin has some answers about that. First off, though, is to know that Austin is in this interesting position, even from Silicon Valley. Now, Silicon Valley is great. I have lived out there twice in my career, and I do appreciate it, but there's some interesting things to know about, especially as you look at how you can drive an innovation culture and an entrepreneurship culture. You'll see, if you know who Tim Ferriss is, there's a number of different voices that are saying this. And I'm not trying to go too far with this, but the real message that I want to say is, it's not about Austin, it's about that the component parts can be brought together in a short period of time. When I got my degree here in Austin, Texas, at the University of Texas at Austin, even though I graduated with an honors degree in engineering, I still couldn't get a job here. I couldn't get a job in Austin, Texas. And so in such a short period of time, since 1990 to present time, for there to be such a shift, this is the thing I want to point to. Well, you might ask, if I'd been working for a Steve Jobs startup, why would I even come back? Austin has an interesting culture, and I want to point to the culture. You've probably heard about William Nelson, maybe you've heard about Janis Joplin, but the thing that I want to point to is not that you have to have a music culture to drive the Philippines to where you want to take it, but the key thing that we tapped into was the insight that came actually from musicians like, Janis Joplin as an example. There's a very celebrated culture of support the individual as well as have a connection to the collective. One of the ways that you see this is we have an expression in Austin called "Keep Austin Weird." This is from a t-shirt, a tie-dye t-shirt that someone was wearing. But essentially the idea is it's a way of pointing to acceptance of risk. And it's also one of the reasons that as you look to the United States for more connectivity to drive the innovation and things like that, I do want to offer up Austin just because I think Austin is one of the most open cities in the United States. And a lot of it comes from that musician culture background, but also there's something that's being supported, that if you really want to drive innovation, you have to deal with, if we're thinking about farming, you actually have to support the weeds. Now in the rainforest, weeds aren't weeds. They're actually not a bad thing. And the same thing about entrepreneurship with this idea of keeping Austin weird. Really supporting the individual is one of the things that I think Austin's been able to tap into. The other part, and I can talk about this for a very long time, is that I think especially since I'm one of the entrepreneurs that came back to Austin to build cultural community about how do we support entrepreneurs? How do we support? At the time, Austin did not have some of the governmental support that it does now. It certainly didn't have a lot of the institutional support for entrepreneurs. It had a lot of industry support, but not entrepreneur support. And not to just focus our conversation around entrepreneurship, but since that happens to be my area of focus of the work that we're doing at Tech Ranch, I just want to point there that the number one thing that I would say that we could talk about for a very long time about how strategic it is how do you get the entrepreneurs themselves working together to create that kind of culture that creates more cohesion among the entrepreneurs themselves. So Austin's always been at the crossroads. You might have heard of the conference called South by Southwest. What South by Southwest, kind of implies is where roads are intersecting. And part of what we've been looking at is now, because of the success of Austin and getting it here, and then even my own recognition of my first dollars earned for my first startup that was based in Austin was actually they weren't dollars. They were actually pesos in Mexico. I had a very advanced piece of software technology for accessing databases based in Austin, but my first customer ended up being a bank based in Guadalajara, Mexico. It was because of that we started looking at how do we actually help drive building innovation bridges where you have, a bridge implies very important things, right? There has to be a firm base on both sides of a bridge. A bridge is not one-sided. A bridge shouldn't be one direction either. Just because, I might say some nice things about Austin, Texas. It's not about just sending Filipinos here to Austin. Bridges should imply things going back and forth. And based on that, as an example, one of the success stories that I could point to is a startup called BioCab that's based from this little town that you might not have heard of in Mexico, that called San Luis Potosí. We are able to get a lot of very quick support for this company in a very short period of time as part of an innovation bridge between Mexico and Austin. Now in 2019, we had 3 large bridges that we built with the countries of Mexico, Italy, and then with a region of part of Siberia called Tumen that was funded by the Eurasia Foundation. But the idea is, back to that original premise about all the world's solutions are already solved. As an example, as COVID struck, we were able to find from the city in Tumen solutions to a problem for COVID called wet lung, which came out of this one brilliant team in AI in the middle of a part of Russia that I never knew anything about before this project, but then actually made it possible. Back to BioCab again, there was talent that had to be recognized, that even though this talented entrepreneur in this team weren't even a part of Mexico's normal main 3 city areas, we were able to recognize that and then actually create a bigger market for it. Really where we're going with this is we want to build a number of solution cities. The idea is that it's not just about inbound to Austin or even inbound only to the United States, but the idea is that we create connections around the world. Earlier, I mentioned connecting Adelaide, Australia, one of our partnerships, into Ethiopia for the specific capability that was only in Adelaide, but we recognized because of the problem set that was for an infectious disease called leishmaniasis. And I can tell you much more about that. But the idea is, can we imagine, if we truly believe that it might be possible to solve all the world's problems, at least to get to the basic level of shared prosperity? Maybe not, some amazing level here, but just to get to shared prosperity. That's what this idea of solution cities, that what we want to do is we want to connect more people together and figure out how to solve that. And I'm convinced that innovation and entrepreneurship are the key components to drive that. The science and technology are important, but we need to enable the innovators and the entrepreneurs to carry it from there. And with that, thank you for this opportunity. I do look forward to connecting deeper with you and building a bridge between both Austin and the Philippines, but also with these other locations around the world. So I appreciate your time today, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kevin. We certainly believe at PAASE about these two-way bridges and also with shared prosperity. So we're going to talk more about this during the moderated discussion. Thank you. And of course, we'd be very interested in having the Philippines designated as one of the solution cities in your network. That would be wonderful. Last but not least, we have Dr. Rowena Cristina Guevara. She is the Undersecretary for Research and Development in the Department of Science and Technology. And she will present to us her introductory presentation. Dr. Guevara.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. I would like to thank PAASE for inviting me to APAMS Online Congress 2020 in this exciting panel on regional inclusivity. Our hosts, Dr. Joel Coelho and Dr. Annabel Villalobos, have been Balik scientists of DOST, and their engagements with several institutions are examples of how we strategically contour the geographic distribution of science and technology innovation ecosystem in the Philippines. Allow me to present the Science for Change program, financing regionally inclusive innovation in the country. The Philippines has long experienced regional disparity in access to major resources that could potentially fuel innovation and socioeconomic growth within the country. This regional disparity in access to resources also extends to financing innovation because most research and development funding is concentrated in the capital and its neighboring regions. This lack of regionally inclusive funding for R&D poses negative effects on the country's social and economic development. According to UNESCO, a developing country should have 380 researchers, scientists, and engineers per million population and 1% GDP expenditure on R&D. The Philippines is gaining ground on the researcher, scientists, and engineers, or RSEs, as massive investments in S&T human resource development starting in 2007 has already paid off. We have RSEs all over the country, and thus we need to start spreading the R&D investments in areas outside of the capital. While R&D grant in aid funding has increased in the last 13 years, it has remained a very low percentage of the total government budget, averaging 0.6% in the last 5 years. And this is 60% of the total R&D spending in the country. Most of R&D activities in the country are concentrated in the National Capital Region, or NCR, Region 4A, the Calabarzon, and Region 3, Central Luzon, getting 80% of the R&D fund of DOST-GIA. And the other 14 regions are left with just 20% of the R&D funding. In the late 2016, we proposed the Science for Change program, which consists of several things, 3 things actually. First is the expansion in 17 fields, and second, the introduction of 6 new programs, and yearly increases in R&D funding towards 2% of the total yearly government budget. Until now, we are still pushing for the Science for Change bill, and we hope that the PAASE will help DOST get the bill passed. In the next slides, I will discuss the third component of the Science for Change bill that we started 4 years ago with modest funding as a strategy to transform and position the Philippines as an S&T innovation global hub. The Accelerated R&D Program for Capacitating Research Development Institutes, or RDIs, and industries has 4 sub-programs. First is the Niche Centers in the Regions for R&D, or NICER. The second is the collaborative research and development to leverage the Philippine economy, or CRADO. The third is the RD lead. And the fourth is the business innovation through science and technology for industry. These are all strategies to geographically distribute the various RD funding and consequently the operations of technology-based manufacturing and innovative production across the country. The NICER program provides grants for higher education institutions, or HEIs, in the regions to undertake quality research to promote regional development with their existing capabilities and resources. The proposed NICER should be unique, a collaborative project among HEIs, and must be duly endorsed by the Regional Development Council. This assures us that there is support from the entire region for the center. Currently, we have 22 existing NICERs in 15 regions with a total funding of 856 million, covering various commodities such as potato, fish, tamarind, citrus, pili, crustaceans, mollusks, and so on, and areas such as astronomy, biodiversity, mountain engineering, environmental informatics, and advanced materials. Cagayan Valley has high freshwater fisheries development potential, particularly for capture fisheries and aquaculture with inland fisheries production. The Freshwater Fisheries Center at the Isabela State University develops artificial breeding and culture techniques for the conservation and propagation of selected freshwater species in the region. In just 2 years, they have assisted farmers in the region through technology updates on promising fish species like ludong, mullet, and eel. The Center for Environmental Informatics in UP Cebu contribute to the growth of the agri-fisheries and environment and natural resources sector through research and development of sensor systems, and they have also developed what we call applications or apps for mango monitoring, bird and biodiversity mapping, and they have already given groundwater potential maps to 46 LGUs. Remember that water is a very big problem in Cebu right now. Sea cucumber fisheries represent the third most economically valuable marine export commodity across the Pacific, after only tuna and pearls, with an annual worth of 20 to 50 million US dollars in the region. The niche center in the region for R&D on sea cucumber in Mindanao State University in Naawan will address the gap of producing grow-out stocks of Holothuria fuscogilva and H. cabra in sea pens or through sea ranching and stock enhancement to support the sea cucumber industry. The RD Lead or R&D Leadership Program was conceived as the local version of the Balik Scientist Program, where we send veteran researchers to universities and RDIs in need of someone who can guide them in crafting an R&D agenda, writing proposals, setting up a new R&D facilities, and so much more. Dr. Asuncion de Guzman assisted MSU Naawan in producing juvenile sandfish in their hatchery. Dr. Francis Baleta and Professor Elviro Cinco assisted Samar State University researchers, faculty, and the Bureau of Fisheries and Agricultural Research of DA personnel who are now focused on conserving and increasing production of blue swimming crab in Samar. Dr. Marco Nemesio Montaño assisted UP Visayas to write research proposals and get them approved for funding, and the UP Visayas Center is now focused on R&D in cephalopods like squid. The third program, or CRADLE, has the objective of creating synergistic academe-industry partnerships to nurture the growth of Filipino companies. The industry states the problem, the academe undertakes the R&D to solve the problem, and government gives fund to the academe. We have invested over 200 million in 44 CRADLE projects. When we made the call for proposals for this September for the new normal in the time of COVID-19, in 1.5 months, we received 123 proposals. Truly, partnership between academia and industry is beginning to change. As a result of partnership within UP Diliman and the Batangas Egg Cooperative, new products are now being developed, such as chicken egg yolk powders and whole chicken egg powders, and several product innovations converting low-value eggs into high-value products. The partnership between Sante Feeds Corporation and De La Salle University has developed cost-competitive aqua feed from Lablab, an alternative to commercial aqua feed. The use of artificial intelligence and Internet of Things has reduced the cost of pesticide in the banana plantation of EOS Resource Corporation in partnership with the University of Southeastern Philippines. The fourth program, or Business Innovation through Science and Technology for Industry, we have only one client so far, Urbanext. It's a pharmaceutical company that develops herbal supplements from indigenous materials. For this BIS project, Urbanext will be able to semi-purify crude plant extracts for the production of pharmaceutical-grade ingredients. When I visited San Francisco last January, I saw the accelerator that they were supposed to start last April at the Philippine Consulate. I imagine that our 44 technology business incubators will soon collaborate with this accelerator and and explore how best to go to build a globally linked the United States. Change. We have seen a slow shift in funding towards if our proposed Science for Change build inclusive innovation in the country. From 100 to 54, the Philippines significantly. It is our first time to be included in the group of innovation achievers due to our remarkable performance in knowledge diffusion and knowledge absorption. With the passage of Science for Change bill, the Philippines will further boost innovation, R&D, as well as global competitiveness of the country's products and services. In the program that I discussed today, our main partners are all of these departments shown here. We believe that it takes a whole of government approach to push for regionally inclusive innovation in the country. Indeed, the Science for Change program has financed regionally inclusive innovation in the country. That ends my presentation.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Guevara, for that enlightening presentation. So now that all of the presenters have given their introductory presentations, we're ready to get into the moderated discussion. So I just want to set up the scenario here. So currently the Philippines, the agriculture sector employs 23% of all of the workers in the Philippines. However, agriculture only contributes about 8.8% to the GDP of the Philippines. Now compare that with the industry sector, which employs about 19%, or let's say 20% of all workers in the Philippines. But the industry sector contributes 30% to the GDP of the Philippines. So even though industry, which is dominated by manufacturing, employs fewer people than agriculture, its contribution to the GDP is far greater at 30% versus 8.8% for agriculture. So for an emerging economy like the Philippines, it stands to reason that there is a need to expand the industry sector, the manufacturing sector in the Philippines so that more people could be employed and the share of manufacturing and industry in the GDP of the country could be increased. And if you include in here industrial research and development as well, then there is the opportunity for value creation, which is innovation. And today we're talking about establishments of innovation ecosystems in the Philippines because that's where the high value is. That's where the job creations takes place. And really, innovation ecosystems, particularly the ones that are driven by science and technology, they constitute the cutting edge of every national economy in the world today. And then one more aspect is if we look at the contribution of the various regions in the Philippines on the GDP, the National Capital Region and Calabarzon, so these are just two regions, they account for 53% of the GDP of the Philippines. Now, these are two out of the 16 regions. There are two other regions, Central Visayas and Central Luzon. Each one of them is less than 10%, but over 5%. but 12 of the regions in the Philippines, each of them contributes less than 5% to the GDP. So again, this really highlights, it underscores the critical need to spread the industry and the innovation ecosystems throughout the country so that other regions can also contribute more to the GDP of the country. And then there's this situation of the COVID-19 epidemic. 12% of the population of the Philippines is concentrated in the national capital region. And the current population is about 108 million, and about 12 million is in the national capital region. And so there is a need to decongest the national capital region. And this is what's spurring the current program of the government, which is the Balik Provincia, or the Return to the Provinces and Return to the Regions initiative, so that again, populations can be redistributed throughout the country. So that's the setting that we have in terms of considering this main topic of regional outreach, developing science and technology innovation ecosystems throughout the regions of the Philippines. So I'm going to be directing some questions to our panelists, but for all the panelists, please feel free to chime in at any time because you have the expertise in these topics here. But I think I'd like to start with NAP, Mr. Concepcion. And this is pertaining to the infrastructure, of course, to be able to establish these manufacturing centers, industrial research and development centers in various parts of the Philippines. There is a necessity for infrastructure, and as you mentioned, digital connectivity. So can you just give us an idea really in terms of the current state of infrastructures, roads, bridges, as well as digital connectivity throughout the country?
Let me begin. Thank you for that very good question. And I would like to start with the nature of the business. Ages ago, a mobile phone is a 10% communications device, and about is 90% communications, and the 10% would be digital. But now we've got smartphones that use 90% for data and then only 10% for communications. And therefore, the system or the technology that we're using right now for the telephone companies are basically, because they cost a lot. So the technology is for communications rather than data. Now, in trying to, as you've said, to decongest urban centers and to reach out to remote areas, we need to link our smallholder farmers, our fisher folks, to the digital community so that they can receive information about government assistance programs. Then government can get their information about what they need. Then government can send back assistance programs through the same internet, through the same highway. We can probably provide e-wallets where assistance for purchases of inputs like planting material, fertilizer, pesticide, where it can be digitally transmitted to the farmers, and then through the use of their telephones, probably get the requirements from the accredited suppliers, and therefore we can provide transparency and then make sure that there are no losses. Because the tendency of some farmers, once they get assistance from government, is instead of buying the inputs or the raw materials that they need, they tend to end up buying tricycles as another form of livelihood, instead of putting that assistance into the program that the government has originally intended for. So the question is how to reach out to these remote areas. And if we have to rely on the telcos, it's going to take a very long time, because it takes years to put up towers. What I've heard personally is this TV white space, the use of VHF and UHF frequencies, which can reach out further than the current technology that is applied for internet services. I heard also that we can use this TV white space for broadband signals. Not only for the agricultural sector, the government has also undertaken a huge online education program. However, it is limited to those areas only that's, of course, has internet connectivity. How about those children that are in the fields, in the mountains? How can they get that kind of online training if there is no connectivity? So I think that the government should explore new technologies, existing technologies, not experimental, like the use of TV white space, and then for the government to acquire this technology, or maybe some investor will come in and provide that kind of service to make sure that every sector of society enjoys internet connectivity. Then we can avoid farmers in Benguet dumping all the carrots that they produce because they could not sell them to the markets, and now because of the COVID, we need real-time data. We need to get the data from the farmers themselves. How are they planting at all? Can they move about? Can they get their supplies? We need that information coming from the fields. But then because of the lockdowns, we cannot use manual enumerators to go out and interview the farmers. We need farmers to reach out and give us what they need, send us what they need, communicate to the government. And that cannot happen at this stage where you have lockdowns without providing access to digital communications. I hope I didn't take up too long.
No, that's fine. Thank you. I mean, certainly for the remote parts of the Philippines, there should be a concerted effort on the part of the government to be able to provide digital connectivity to those areas. But of course, I should hasten to add that in major cities in the Philippines, there is reasonably good digital connectivity. And so this, again, goes back to this critical need of the country to first develop its manufacturing base, to have this free ports and economic zones that really are focused on manufacturing. The manufacturing sector is so critical for the country because that's where you can have large-scale jobs creation. And then later on, we can overlay on that industrial research and development in cooperation with local research centers and universities. But let's now focus on the manufacturing in the Philippines. I understand that the Department of Trade and Industry has what is called the Philippine Investment Promotion Plan, or PIPP, which is actually spearheaded by the Philippine Board of Investments. And in the Philippines, there are 19 investment promotion agencies. And the lead one, of course, is the Philippine Board of Investments, which oversees all of these investment promotion agencies. And one of the clusters is on manufacturing and logistics and business process management. And I found these free port authorities. There are 7 of those. There's one in Bataan. There's the Basis Conversion and Development Authority. There's the Clark Development Corporation, the Clark International Airport Corporation, the Subic Bay Metropolis Authority. There's the Subic Clark Alliance for Development. And of course, there's the Philippine Economic Zone Authority, or PAASE, which has established economic zones in various regions around the country. Can someone tell us, please, with all of these economic zones that have been established, what is the level of global manufacturing activity that's currently present in these economic zones? Do we know of how many global companies are actually active in these economic zones? And so this question, I suppose, goes to the officials of the Department of Trade and Industry and Board of Investment.
Okay, I'll take the lead.
Okay.
We do have, the Board of Investment is the leading investment promotions agency of government. And you mentioned the Investment Priority Program. It is the Board of Investment that identifies what activity will be provided the incentives that can avail of the incentives in the program. And we do that every 2 years. And then we send it to the Office of the President for his permission, because it entails adjustments in the revenues, because we give forecast on how much revenue we will be taking off the collections. So that is properly coordinated with the Office of the President. Now, for the process, for the export processing zones, which you mentioned, they have their own incentives program, which the tax reform bill is trying to correct, because they have this feature. Well, I guess the question is, are we attracting enough investors? The answer to that is maybe. The answer is we're not. Well, it all depends on the incentive packages that we could offer, and our hands are limited to the ones that have been identified in the investment priority program. We do not have, compared to other countries like Vietnam, um, uh, Myanmar, Indonesia, and all those countries that also have export processing zones. They give more liberal approvals. They have more liberal programs, and their agencies are more. It's not that we are not. They have a greater flexibility in the way they will invite companies. So for our export processing zones, yes, they are active. And then as you may, well, the Philippines is an archipelago. We're separated from the rest of Asia. So that is one factor that we need to overcome. And that's why we're trying to promote the shipping industry, shipping as one of the forms. We're trying to position the Philippines to be located as to develop it as a hub for, but we need to be positioned in a place where we are at the center of anything. Right now, the Philippines is at the edge, so that creates a lot of difficulty for our promotions. We're in between Japan and Indonesia and Australia, but most of the investments are in that on the western side, Thailand side, India side. So we're doing our best to compete, and we have our limitations. Thank you.
Right. I'd like to turn to you, Attorney Gepti. If you could comment, please, on these investment packages that the Department of Trade and Industry is offering global corporations to incentivize them to set up shop in the Philippines, at least for their manufacturing functions. I looked at the various economic zones under the Philippine Economic Zone Authority, and I noticed that most of them are 100% owned by Filipino companies. And if I compare that with neighboring countries of the Philippines, I just like what Mr. Concepcion mentioned, those countries are more liberal in terms of their packages. And I think that includes as well the ownership of the company. Could you address that point, please? What is the ownership requirement of these global companies that are setting up shop in the Philippines in the economic zones?
Thank you, Joel, for that question, and thank you, Gobna, for your insights. First, Joel, maybe to provide context in the conversation, with the end view of making the Philippines as one of the manufacturing hubs in the region, for example, entails a lot of questions. So, in other words, every country, every economy would like to be a manufacturing hub. And of course, it's always a competition. Thus, countries would come up with their several packages. Sometimes there is a competition. So the more incentives you grant to investors, then of course, most likely they will invest in your economy. But of course, it shouldn't be that case. I mean, if you want to be competitive, I think the issue is that you have to find your niche in the whole global value chain. There's so many sectors, there are many subsectors, there's so many industries. So it's for the Philippines to identify what sector or subsectors you would focus on. Now, we have economic zones, and we have, of course, several government agencies promoting investments. Now, in the area of competition, other than incentives that we provide, I think one factor that you have to consider also is the cost of production, cost of manufacturing. And in that area, the cost of power, the cost of logistics, the cost of raw materials, so the vital components. So the question is that, are we competitive in those areas? Okay. How are we faring with other countries when it comes to cost of utilities, for example? Electricity, telco, water, among others. So that's a primary challenge actually that we're having right now. And if you will listen from our investors, most of their concerns would revolve into the cost of power. Now, second would be on incentives. Now, of course, as I mentioned, every country has its own package of incentives. Now, you mentioned that most of the companies are Filipino-owned companies, and that when it comes to encouraging rather, foreign investors, it's a bit challenging for the Philippines. Well, there's so many reasons for that. Okay, we can of course enumerate a lot of factors, but one of the reasons that they would always, of course, table to us is, of course, the limitations on foreign equity. As we all know, in the Constitution, we have certain sectors reserved for Filipino citizens. So that is something that, of course, we have no choice but to respect that. That is in the Constitution. So in other words, how to, in a way, attract them would really be in a way of identifying that niche that we need. So in other words, I think the way I look at it, noting that right now, that production of goods and services have already been revolutionized by international trade. As they say, goods and services are no longer either made in America or made in China or made in the Philippines. That in the United States or the Philippines will win when products made in the Philippines are exported to China, or China's products being exported to the Philippines. In that case, China will win because products are put together in one country from components sourced in other countries and then sold all over the world. So in other words, from research, product development, distribution, manufacturing, sourcing of materials, it's a wide range of stages when it comes to production. And I think for the Philippines, the way I look at it, we have to, in a way, focus on where we are good at. And since the topic is on research and development, and also I would say product and development, I think this is one area that we should focus on. If there are investments that we should also encourage in the Philippines, I think we should encourage more investment in this area. When it comes to research and development, the foreign equity limitation is not there. So I think this is one thing that we can, of course, strengthen, and eventually maybe the Philippines can just license and, of course, export technologies and eventually become a manufacturing hub.
Right. Thank you for that. So in reality, the Board of Investments has identified 12 major industries that the Philippines can focus on. This includes automotive, electronics and electricals, aerospace parts, chemicals, garments, even shipbuilding, and so on and so forth. And my colleague Anne has a suggestion on that. But before I go to Anne, I'd like to speak to Dr. Guevara. Dr. Guevara, so when the Philippines focuses on manufacturing in this particular sectors, automotive, electronics, aerospace, they will need expertise. They will need trained professionals to be working on this. How does DOST contribute to the training of these professionals to be able to realize these sectors in Philippine manufacturing?
I will cite 3 ways. Joel. First would be our scholarship programs producing the bachelor's, master's, and PhDs who are knowledgeable about this area. And we would appreciate that these areas be on already because that will retain the talent that we have trained. Second, we have the ballistic scientist program and the RD lead that can assist them in all of these new adventures. And third, and this is the most important, is that we have put up facilities all over the country in support of these particular areas in manufacturing. So for example, at DOST Metals Industry Research and Development Center, we have put up what's called Amerial, which is on mechatronics and automation. We have also put up, with the help of Balik scientist Gobet Advincula, we have put up the AMSEN. This is the Advanced Manufacturing Center. And so with all of these facilities, all the way to even product packaging, we believe that we can help these industries that have been approved and agreed upon by the government agencies. Thank you.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Before I go to you, Anne, one more question to Assistant Secretary Asteria. So you actually referred to these 12 industries that are considered priority by the Board of Investments for development, particularly in the manufacturing sector in the Philippines. You are in the regional operations of the Department of Trade and Industry. Could you tell us how they are progressing, the development of these 12 industrial sectors in the various regions in the Philippines? If you could give us an update.
Thank you. Thank you very much. At the regional operations group, we are really working as we develop this industry with, via industry clustering programs. We are working with other government line agencies, national agencies, with the academe, and with the private sector. And we have regular, to institutionalize that ecosystem, we have regular meetings, and we also have our industry clustering plans. And a lot of these industry clusters have really progressed. It really depends on the industry cluster and on the region. We also seek the help or hand-holding from other players within the DTI, like the BOI, the Industry and Investments Group, because they are really the ones who are pushing this as an agenda in the department. We can only move with their help in the regional offices.
Do you have any idea in terms of how many locators, international locators, have already been attracted to come to the Philippines to focus on these sectors, automotive, shipbuilding, and so on and so forth? Can you address that?
Yeah, Cebu is a host of a shipbuilding cluster in northwestern Cebu. And we at the regional operations group, like our office here in Region 7, we really, for localized concerns, we work with the local government units, but most of these concerns are really addressed by the PESA or by the Board of Investments. But we link these companies to them for localized issues. For example, just lately, we are also, Cebu is also a host of the Mactan Exports Processing Zone and MEPS 1 and 2. And we're encountering problems, especially during COVID. We had to facilitate their movement, especially for their people and for their cargoes. These are local concerns. We had to address them. But then in terms of just recently, with the help of Yusik Perry, we had to negotiate with the tenant, the landlord of MEPS 2, for example, because there were some concerns on increased rate. We had to seek the help of the local government unit. And I think at this point, as I speak, we are successful. We were able to retain, because these are very, very important locators, we were able to get a positive move that they will stay, because 38 of them were already planning to leave because of some changes in the rent rate. We were able to negotiate with the help of Yusik Perry, Secretary Mon Lopez, and the local government unit. They finally got buckle down to back to that drawing board and finally decide that they are staying. So this what I mean is we are dealing with local concerns of this just to handhold after
Right.
sales.
Right, right. That is very encouraging. Thank you. I mean, I'm very happy to learn that there are these global locators, particularly in shipbuilding, that are already in place in Cebu. And of course, because of the pandemic, there's been some disruption, but the hope is that most of them will be staying, of course. So that's very encouraging. Thank you. Kevin, I'll go to you right after I turn to Anne, and we're going to start talking about entrepreneurship. So when we were talking about these 12 priority manufacturing sectors like automotive and shipbuilding, and notice one conspicuous sector that seems to be missing on the list. And if you could please talk about that.
Okay. Now, background deal with it. So in the 12 priority industries that's listed by DTI, clinical trials, manufacturing of vaccines, therapeutics, health analytics are not included despite some clinical trial societies, professional societies, a lot of science societies, professional science societies in the Philippines. Now, it's also noted here that the Philippines is the only ASEAN country that doesn't produce vaccines even for its people. So with COVID-19 pandemics, there's an emergency need to have vaccines, therapeutics, analytics, health analytics, where scale and speed are a must because of this pandemic. So would it be possible to have clinical researches, vaccine manufacturing, even to start with filling, packaging, and so on, and manufacturing of therapeutics later on? So what is then DTI, BOI, DOST's approach to this?
I think how do you raise your hands in this form?
All right.
Anyway, can I answer that first?
Oh, thank you.
In the preparation of the investment priority plan, all sectors, the national government agencies are consulted in what they think should be put in that program, because although you can engage in any type of activity, the investment priority plan is the only one that identifies 12 areas, because those are the areas that we want to encourage investors to come in. And those are the only areas where we provide incentives like income tax holidays. So anyone that is interested in coming into the Philippines and investing in those areas, they are allowed, for as long as it's not on the negative list. It's not an activity that is not allowed. I mean, for example, the making of firearms or weapons of mass destruction. Businesses, industries, activities that are allowed under the Constitution can engage in the Philippines. However, the provision or the privilege of receiving income tax holidays is limited to the IPP, Investment Priority Plan, which is consulted with every sector of society, including the business sector. Now, I think if anybody wants to enter into clinical trial analytics, all they have to do is file their application as to register under the Board of Investment, and then our people will evaluate under what category they can apply. For example, clinical trial may not be there specifically, but it may enter. It might fall under a different provision, if it's engaged in health. I think that can be allowed. So we have to evaluate the business model, what it actually intends to produce, and then we can find a way. And if it's not there, we can always write to the president. If we find an activity which is very much in demand right now, especially anything related to health, we can, of course, write the president for an exemption. that is allowed. We can do that specifically for one project if that is necessary. Clinical trials analytics, we are going into that space, and that's why I was mentioning TV white space. We are trying to build a data lake where it's going to be a cloud computing platform. We're trying to build that. There are many small ones, but not one that integrates all the data that can be gathered from all sectors, private and public. So we are, and all we need is an application for a businessman to tell us what they're trying to do, and then we will evaluate and receive that application and make sure that we can facilitate, make it easier for you, and reduce the risk that you are taking if you're going to enter into a new area that has not been identified before. That's easily done, ma'am.
Well, thank you for your insights. I also would like to ask Yusek Guevara regarding this question.
Thank you very much, Anne. DOST actually leads the sub-technical working group on vaccine development in the Interagency Task Force on COVID-19. And part of our task is to find an international vaccine developer who is willing to locally manufacture in the Philippines in partnership with a local company. We have been working on this for the last 2 months, and I'm very happy to report that there are already 2 local companies that are interested to do that. And we are now matching them with partners among the 139 companies that are developing vaccines. And we have an expert panel on vaccine development who is advising us together with the FDA and the DOH on how best to facilitate this to happen in the country. As for therapeutics, we are also doing the same. We are now participating in the WHO Solidarity Trial, but aside from that, we are developing local therapeutics such as VCO, Lagundi, Tawa-Tawa, as a response to the COVID-19. And the clinical trials are underway. And Governor Knapp, I am not sure if you noticed in the IPP, but it specifically says there that clinical trials are covered. So it says conduct of clinical trials, including drug trials, are covered as innovation driver. I don't know if this has been removed in the new one, but in the 2017 to 2019 IPP, that was included in answer to Dr. Villalobos' question. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you for knowing that, because I was approached by some investors before. These are international. They wanted to put up biosimilars manufacturing in the Philippines, and I didn't know how to go about it. So this session is really helpful in case there are some investors from other countries who wanted to invest in the Philippines. Manufacturing of therapeutics, especially biosimilars. And I think the Philippines is really ready to do that in terms of professional qualification. It just needs a lot of training. That's why I was asking Yusek Guevara, because in order to have a manufacturing of vaccines and therapeutics, it has to be GMP certified, good manufacturing practice. And that needs a lot of training, especially if it's biotechnology product. It needs a lot of training, mentoring, succession planning, like that. You do not train only one, or else that person, once qualified, goes to another place.
Yeah. And thank you so much. And Governor Knapp, that's your proper title, Governor. Governor Knapp, please take note of this, because we earnestly and respectfully recommend this to the BOI. And that is to consider this, I guess the umbrella term is clinical research, which includes clinical trials of drugs, as one ecosystem really that we believe needs the assistance of the Board of Investment to incentivize, to really establish it in the country, in the same way that the business process management ecosystem got established. Because all of the players seem to be in the Philippines already. You have these contract research organizations that are global, that are connecting the locals with the global companies that are interested in doing these clinical trials in the Philippines. And I've done some research, and now there's over 100 hospitals across the country in the Philippines that have substantial experience in clinical trials. And they've been around now for 20 years. And so it just seems to me that they just need a little bit of fortification, a little bit of assistance to really solidly establish this as a thriving and vibrant ecosystem in the Philippines. And the Philippines is producing a lot of chemical engineers, a lot of chemists on a yearly basis, and a lot of them end up going abroad. Well, with this ecosystem here, there's going to be a lot of reasons for them to stay in the country and help build the ecosystem. So thank you.
I just like to add that under the Board of Investment is not, well, if there's an investor that's interested to come in, all they have to do is come to us, and we'll try to find space where they can be accommodated. So, I mean, yes, it might be written that it is not part of the IPP, but just come to us and we'll see and find a way for you to come in.
All right, that's helpful. Thank you. Thank you so much. Yes. So now we turn to you, Kevin. Since you really are a champion for entrepreneurship and also for linking entrepreneurial ecosystems around the world together for shared prosperity, which is part of the goal here. So let's be more specific here. If TechCrunch is going to partner with the Philippines, who exactly do you foresee yourself partnering with? Are you going to be partnering with incubators? Are you going to be partnering with universities? Tell us who will you be partnering with?
The typical partner, let me use in Adelaide, Australia, I'll use an example that's not terribly far from the Philippines, but in Adelaide, the organization, we're not here to do any replacement of any, just to be very clear at the very beginning, because I think this is an important distinction that I learned early on in this process. Instead of doing something like having WeWorks everywhere and having tech ranches everywhere or something like that, the thing that we've really discovered is we need to work with a local partner that has, like I mentioned earlier in my metaphor of the bridge, you have to have a firm base on one side, you have to have a firm base on another side. One of the things I think we're all seeing is, globalization has a certain, strength and weakness to it, but part of my overall concern is that the local entrepreneurial ecosystem have its roots and have a strong basis there. In the case of Adelaide, Australia, the partnership that we struck was with the incubator called the New Ventures Institute, which is part of Flinders University. Flinders University is a top 2% research university in the world, and they have a lot of science, especially in the healthcare space, but it's somewhat isolated. I sometimes give my colleagues at Flinders or at the NVI a little bit of a hard time in that they have this, it's at the part of Australia that is farthest away from the United States. And so it's somewhat isolated from the standpoint of the brilliance there, but they have amazing technology. And so back to what this idea is, we believe as part of the Solution City idea is that we need to have a firm base in each one of the places, someone that can represent the local talent, as well as the local problem sets that might need to be addressed. A good example in Austin, Tech Ranch is just another peer in this work. In our case, we have a set of entrepreneurs we work with, but also we're connected to a number of the civic institutions in town that are very concerned. Like even in the United States, even in Austin, Texas, as well as its done through the years, there's a lot of concern that there's expected to be more than 40,000 people homeless that weren't expected to be homeless here in Austin, Texas. Austin is probably best positioned out of any city in the United States to go through the storm that's happening right now. And so the idea is to actually have that relationship on both sides. I don't know if that kind of gives you a characterization of this, but we're working on this first stage of the relationships. Well, the very first stage was building the bridges, but now we're in the process of building this higher level. You might even think of it as an umbrella that has a number of different parties, where Austin, Texas is a participant, but not the only place. It's not the only terminal place to tie into.
Right. So Kevin, I like that metaphor of a bridge, because a bridge is typically two-way. It's not just going in one direction, but it goes in both directions. So we're talking about mutual traffic here and mutual benefits. And as you mentioned, shared prosperity. So do I imagine this correctly, that with this link here, potentially the startup companies and the entrepreneurs, let's say in the Philippines, when linked with the solution cities in various parts of the world, including Austin, that they would be able to gain access to markets, they'd be able to gain access to investments, and so on and so forth. Is that a correct thinking?
Yeah, so that is, in fact, one of the nice things about focusing on, I'm sorry if it might be a little bit of background that's happening. One of the things that happens that's interesting to the point that Governor Concepcion mentioned earlier is one of the things that I like about focusing on impact related businesses is the funds will travel farther than their financial investor counterparts. Most venture capitalists, as an example, the funds in a traditional VC firm, will travel, or the history has always been, an hour to an hour and a half away from where the partner in the VC firm lives. And typically an hour and a half, typically by car, not even by airplane. We stumbled into this, with my original vision of wanting to build an organization that actually had impact on the world, not just building businesses, but on building, impact innovation businesses. That the typical investor a lot of times is readdressing dollars that he or she might have had in charity and putting them into investment vehicles. And what's interesting about that is the dollars therefore will travel much farther, but they're not thinking like charity anymore. They're thinking about let's have a triple line bottom return. Let's actually do something good for the world, good for business, just from a financial standpoint, and also good for the environment or whatever the other concern area that the investor has. That's definitely something that I've seen. The other side of it too is one of the examples that hadn't been formalized inside of the Solution City to this point about, the thing that I know you've picked up on, because I kind of joke about it a little bit. I like to give my fellow countrymen a hard time about this idea that every bridge is just coming to the United States and it's one directional. I see that as a problem. And I saw that as a problem at the very early stages of building Tech Ranch, because of and I'm sorry for the obnoxious American attitude about that it's like, it's like, yeah, we're building a bridge, you're coming to me. I absolutely like making fun of that, because I understand the strength in it, and there's also a massive weakness. One of the things that type of thinking would have overlooked is, as an example, one of Mexico's finest biosafety experts through our network has now gotten access to Egypt. There's a similar set of needs, since we're talking about biosecurity and biosafety type of issues especially around infectious diseases. This is a good example that, yes, the connection for the leishmaniasis example I gave earlier, and yes, in this case, for the biosafety and biosecurity standards that are perhaps, US-based biosecurity standards, trying to impose those directly on Egypt with it's not the same type of funding doesn't make sense. but this really advanced capability that was in Mexico is perfect for Egypt. I think that that's an important thing. Now, I like to say, because I do hang on to Texas swagger a little bit, I like to say that Austin was the crossroads that those two connections happened at. But it's no longer about this idea about, you know, the singular focus about just coming to, coming to the United States. I truly hope, as we look back in 10 years at what these moments, actually meant, is that we started finding out the true interconnectivity of these type of solutions. I think that's the only way we really can get to shared prosperity.
Right.
And so that's kind of what really the idea of the target.
Right, right. So let's make this let's make this more concrete, Kevin. You use as an example a startup company, BioCab, from Mexico, and it got linked with Austin. So tell us what BioCab is doing as a company. What is it producing, and what is that nature of linkage that it had with Austin?
So BioCab's a great example in that even today, present day, most of the food processing plants in the United States, when there's a spill to be cleaned up or a mess to be handled, or when you're cleaning the equipment, typically toxic cleaners are used to do that type of cleaning. And so you will actually, the factory owner or the food processing plant will do the cleaning, and then they have to clean up after the cleaning.
Yeah.
BioCab has a biotech-based solution that is non-toxic. It's non-toxic to humans, but it's sanitizers and degreasers that are based on.
Right.
Actually, the research came out of human enzyme capability or background. The scientists that led the work actually had done that. Now, why BioCab's so interesting is, here, even in the United States, as good as we might have it or not, for us to have toxic cleaners to be used in food processing, especially, just doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. But the thing
Right.
about it is, we're able to play. I mean, the thing that I love about what BioCab is doing is we're able to actually speak to the situation of not only it's about doing something good for the environment or to the health, it also saves time. It saves time because the factory is not having to, clean up and then clean up the cleanup. And because toxic chemicals are still toxic, even if you're using small amounts, right? And so now I gave the example, and I really love BioCab as an example because the entrepreneur who leads that venture is from this, like the third smallest state in Mexico. It's called the Hidalgo state. And the town that the company originally was discovered in was San Luis Potosí. Like I mentioned earlier, it's not Guadalajara, Mexico City, or Monterrey, which are the three powerhouse cities of Mexico, right? And it's interesting. Yeah. I'm really proud about that we can actually discover that kind of capability because personally, and I think this is true for all of us, let's have the business factory or the food processing save the money on the amount of time it saves, and then also not expose us to toxic cleaners when they're actually just doing the natural day-to-day cleaning. And it's a great example, no matter which side you're looking at it from, business time or solving a toxic issue.
So have you then facilitated linking BioCab to markets in the United States?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I on my slide, I think I might have mentioned. I took, just because there's a lot of information on the slide. We helped them get their U.S. side organization set up. We connected them within the first months of interacting with them to more than $1 million worth of active opportunity for their business. It was initially a little bit overwhelming for them, and so we helped them also deal with some of the operational issues. Because their degreasers and sanitizers are useful for dealing with COVID-19. We've worked with the Texas Secretary of State to get special permissions so that they can actually be used, even though they haven't gone through formal EPA process, just because in some of the situations, especially like on schools and things like that, you want to have something that you're not, not getting, you can sanitize the school without exposing children to, toxic chemicals. So there's a lot of different things. Their board of directors was built around, actually out of my personal network. And then the investment, we introduced the lead entrepreneur to their last 3 investors. What's interesting as well, and I'll just say this because I think it is an interesting characteristic as well. Not only were we able to introduce them to US-based investors, but because of the way the system was set up and the way that we were able to connect in, there were Mexican investors as well who hadn't had the venture background that you typically find around, the startup culture of, say, Austin or Silicon Valley. We were actually able to help these other investors take a step closer to making these type of investments as well. The Mexican investors, specifically in this case, which is a unique characteristic. The joke that one of my Mexican friends said, he had, or the lead entrepreneur said was, he had to meet a freaking gringo to meet his Mexican investor. And I just thought that was part of the way that we can actually help structure things. Not that it's just all about TechRanch, but there's a characteristic that I think that sometimes with different eyes, we can see different things than any one person or culture might see.
Right. That is extremely helpful, Kevin. Actually, I could easily envision a lot of young entrepreneurs in the Philippines because they come up with all of these brilliant ideas. I could easily envision them being linked to the United States and other countries in that network to find the proper investment as well as market really for their products, as well as entrepreneurs from all those other countries, the United States and Italy and all of these other countries, Mexico, having partners in the Philippines, entrepreneurs who then would be able to introduce their product into the Philippine market. And I appreciated your comment about essentially waking up a lot of these investors in Mexico who typically would not invest in startups. I think the same thing needs to happen in the Philippines. There are folks in the Philippines who are well able to invest into startups, but they're just not familiar with that environment yet. So with your assistance, I think that could very well happen and get facilitated in the Philippines.
We would be very interested.
Much.
Right. Yeah, I might just say one closing comment about that concept too. The thing that's interesting is to be able to tease out that cultural awareness that's unique to the Philippines, or say unique to Texas, or unique to Kristiansand, Norway, where we've done other work as an example. And then to be able to take and learn across those borders. A lot of the thing that I think is the most powerful about these kind of connections is the couplings of the culture.
Yeah.
I can give you examples specifically from Australia. Just for the sake of time, I won't go into a lot of details, but the main thing about it is that a lot of the awareness and the waking up is not changing any technical skill that the individual entrepreneur has in country. It's just more about being able to see, just like in my case, because my first dollars earned were the pesos in Mexico, I immediately, in 1994, I immediately got to see a different way of doing business, and it made me a better entrepreneur long term. And that same kind of coupling, I'm really passionate about because it's transformative. Thank you for the opportunity, and sorry to talk a little long about that.
That's fine. Thank you, Kevin. And I definitely will be keeping in touch with you so we can work together on this to designate a city in the Philippines as a solution city for entrepreneurs. Time is running out, but I have one more question for our panelists, particularly the ones who are based in the Philippines. First of all, I really would like to send my congratulations to your respective departments. As headed by Secretary Ramon Lopez for the Department of Trade and Industry, Secretary Boy de la Peña in the case of the Department of Science and Technology, and of course you governors and undersecretaries and assistant secretaries. You've done a wonderful job actually in advancing the objectives of your respective departments. But I'm well aware as well that the administration of the current president is going to expire in about what, a year or two? And so my question is, what are your plans to ensure the continuity of these marvelous programs that you have initiated during the current administration? So that, again, everything will flow toward the building of this thriving and globally linked innovation ecosystems across the country. Could you start, Secretary Guevara? Yes, yeah.
Thank you very much, Joel. Our approach is to legislative action, to have a law for the Science for Change program, and we are actively seeking the support of PAASE in getting this approved. And we have very good supporters in both the Senate and the Congress, but PAASE would be a very good supporter to make sure that this goes on even beyond several administrations from now. Thank you.
Right. I think our PAASE president, Giselle Concepcion, is in the audience, so I'm sure she is excited and very happy to be of assistance. What about Attorney Gepti?
Yes, thank you, Joel. That's a very important question because at the end of the day, what is important is to sustain all these efforts and initiatives so that we can achieve that goal of making the Philippines as the innovation hub. One thing for sure, one important aspect is, of course, to have an entrenched roadmap and policies when it comes to innovation. And historically, I would say that in my stint in government, since I joined in 2010, programs, for example, on intellectual property protection and enforcement has been there and has been consistently been implemented regardless of the change in administration. I can cite, for example, the Innovation, Technology, and Support Offices. When I joined the Intellectual Property Office of the Philippines in 2010, we have set up the same, and it has grew to 100 now issues today. And as I mentioned earlier, these are stationed in various state colleges, universities, and research and development institutions. And they have been developing a lot of inventions. That's why it's interested also that these issue networks be connected to our counterparts and, of course, partners like TechCrunch, for example, because one big challenge for them is the commercialization of their intellectual property. And then, of course, we have the innovation roadmap. We have institutionalized also the innovation policies. As I mentioned, the passage of the Innovation Act and the Innovative Startup Act basically will entrench these programs and initiatives of the government. And noting that this is more on a technical field and we are working with professionals, technicals, I'm pretty confident that this will be sustained in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Attorney Gepti. Governor Knapp.
Yes, we would like to continue building on the culture of transformation that we have put in place. We need to, as I've said earlier, we need to really promote the culture of innovation. We need to protect our scientists and engineers. We need more an upgrade of the intellectual property rights. We want our scientists to receive more benefits from their discoveries, from their creation. We also would like to see the continuation of the culture of participative governance, because as we really have to go down to the grassroots level and find out and determine how we can come in. So we need more stakeholder consultations, and for government to really play its role, not just as facilitator and regulator, but to be a participant in the development of our of the economic land space that the Board of Investment is in. And lastly, we would like to see a continuation of the collaborative efforts of government. We have been working closely with the Department of Science and Technology, especially in the project of the lactic acid of UP Mindanao. We have other projects of engagement with the Department of Agriculture, trying to reach out to their fisher folks and farmers, which they're having difficulty. So we're trying to bring in investors in that area, that sphere. And And so hopefully we can leave this as a legacy to this administration for the next to carry. So it's a culture of transformation, culture of innovation, participation, and collaboration among the stakeholders. We have the government, industry, academe, and lastly is to put in community, because unless business and government is addressing a need, then whatever activity it is, it's not going to be sustainable. So thank you for bringing us together, and maraming salamat to all the participants and the panelists.
Thank you. Before we leave, Secretary Ernesto Pernia, the former Socioeconomic Secretary of the Philippines, is in the audience. I'd like to give you a few minutes to talk, Secretary Ernie, but before that, Kevin, any parting message to the gallery?
Well, first off, it's exciting to see the policies that y'all are pulling together. I mean, I definitely see the right pieces coming together, and it's exciting to be a part of. I'm learning more about the Philippines. I've definitely, as you've seen me, I've been looking at some of the things you guys have been talking about specifically on the screen, just because it's real exciting to see how you're putting things together. Know that as the founder and CEO of Tech Ranch, we'd like to be your partners in supporting the work that you're doing. And it's exciting to see how you're building your country. And, with that, thank you for the opportunity. This has been my honor to be here.
Thank you, Kevin. Secretary Pernia, could you give us some comments, please?
On the point about continuity and bridges and linkages, no, it's really rudimentary. A rudimentary requirement is that there be active cooperation and partnerships between and among the government, of course, private sector, academe. That's really very basic. And, in terms of the government, we cannot expect the whole of government, the whole of the cabinet to be cognizant or to be interested in science and technology and innovation ecosystem. So I think if we can get a critical mass of cabinet members or departments such as DOST, of course, USEC GEV is there, and then DOST, of course DTI, and then Department of Agriculture is important because we have many, agriculture can have several sources of several opportunities for innovation. And then of course NEDA and probably Department of Health, because we are now getting interested in health products, given that we are in this crisis, in this coronavirus crisis. So I think these five agencies, DTI, DOST, DA, DOH, and NEDA, if they can really cohere, they can work together and become a more permanent critical mass of interested cooperative departments, then that would help in terms of continuity.
Yes.
And making this ecosystem self-sustaining. And then we need to relate very importantly with the private sector. Of course, the academia should be there, the private sector, because while the academia is the source of innovation, then we need the users of innovation, and then those who can disseminate and spread the innovation through marketing. So these are very important dimensions of the innovation ecosystem. So for example, in this present administration, you cannot expect the president to be active in this thing, but if we can have these critical departments to really cohere and work together, that would be a big help. And then secondly, yeah, and yeah, okay, so that's on that. For example, in terms of agriculture, I was in a seminar with Giselle on marine products last week, and there is this in the Central Visayas, Cebu, and in the Visayas in general, Karajinan. Karajinan is a very common product which has several uses, and there is this brown Karajinan called sarcasm that the one who presented this from the University of San Carlos in Cebu said that it has so many uses, medical uses, commercial uses, and even uses for making export products. So I hope to, the scientists from this University of San Carlos asked me to appeal to the Secretary of Agriculture that they be given permission to harvest this brown Karajinan called sarcasm, so that they can, so that they can do some value creation from this product.
Right. Okay.
And, so that's another thing, and yeah, I have a question to Yusek Gev. You mentioned that the GERD, the government spending as a ratio to GDP, has already risen to 0.6%. Is that correct?
That is not correct, Secretary. That 0.6 is a percentage of the government's GAA.
Of the government's GAA, I see. Okay, not in relation to GDP.
For GDP, it's 0.14%.
So it's still there. It has been stuck there for a decade now, I think.
Yeah, Secretary, mas mabilis kasi yung GDP growth kesa sa investment in R&D.
I see. So has DOST been given a higher budget this year?
Our budget for the last 2 years has been steady, has not increased.
Steady state.
Yes.
So that's not going to be very helpful. But you have been giving a lot of scholarships now, sending scholarships, scholars abroad.
Yes, Secretary. For the human resource development, we are very good. We will reach the target by 2022.
And then you have also expanded the Balik Scientist program and giving more incentives to Balik scientists, right?
Yes,
so
in the Balik scientists, we have increased by 50% per year. So it's a very good number.
So I thought that would have ramped up the budget for DOST. So it's still same level as before this administration. So that's disappointing. Okay, then on the PESA thing, I don't think it's correct to say that all the locators there are Philippine owned. I thought many of them, or in fact most of them, are foreign owned, and that is why they are in a special economic zone, because that is where they can be allowed to operate, not in other areas of the economy. So somebody mentioned that locators in
I did
no
I did because
but I think that is not exactly correct, Joel.
Okay.
Because,
All right.
Mitsubishi, Toyota, all these companies are foreign owned, and that is why they are in the special economic zone.
Okay, that's good to know.
The workers and maybe the managers are Filipinos. Yeah.
All right.
Okay,
that's good to know.
Those are my comments. And
thank you so much, Secretary Pernia. Thank you. Very valuable comments.
I'm very passionate about really getting this innovation ecosystem going, energized, and continue on beyond whoever is going to be heading whoever is going to be the Philippines president. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. We have to wrap up, but I just want to give 1 minute to our president, Giselle Concepcion. Giselle, could you kindly just give 1 minute of remark, if you will? Okay, probably Giselle is in another session, actually. Anyway, Anne, you're my co-moderator. Last word, please, before we wrap up. And please unmute yourself.
Sorry. Thank you very much for all the discussion and also for all the knowledge and experience that you have shared with us. For me personally, I learned a lot because I'm not in business and I'm really a scientist. But Joel has oriented me to this session, and I thank you all for today. Joel.
All right. So with that, again, thank you so very much for our distinguished panelists. Thank you very much for joining us today. And I'd like to thank all of the audience and all of those who will be seeing the video of these proceedings. Thank you very much. Good morning in the Philippines and good night in North America. Bye for now.
Thank you. Thank you too.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
I stayed the whole session.
Hi, Ernie. How are you?
Yeah.
Thank you, Alvin.
Thank you,
Alvin.
Joel. Yes. Hi, Zach.
Alvin, data is a source of by the way, no, agriculture pala has been complaining that their contribution to GDP has been counted as only 8% or 9%. But then, you know, if you look at